Welcome, everybody. Bienvenue à cet event de cet après-midi. I know that people come here from different time zones, and so far, good afternoon might be already a very Eurocentric approach to time. My name is Matthias Midell, and I'm your moderator for the first part of the event. I take first of all the opportunity to express all my best wishes to Hartmut to his 80th anniversary. So that's the reason why we are together here. You see a couple of book covers. Some of them will be mentioned this afternoon. Others will be referred to in a kind of footnote. Yeah, so we all are a little bit nervous because we had conferences, we had lectures, we had seminars on Zoom, but not yet a birthday party. So this is a new thing to all of us, and we try to manage it as good as we can. I would, and we do that in a mixed responsibility. On the one hand, I speak here on behalf of the Global and European Studies Institute, at which Hartmut is teaching now for, I would say, decades, but also the director of the Institute of Political Science is here, and there are, of course, a lot of colleagues and friends of Hartmut from various institutions, and we will see that later on. I will be very brief, but only expressing my gratitude to Hartmut that he contributes so much to the work of our institute over the past years, and that he had a very special function to Leipzig University. Some of you might be aware that Leipzig has a very long tradition in world history and the dealing with all waves, ups and downs of globalization since the early 20th century. But in 1989, we went through a process of renationalization. All of a sudden, the German question became so very important, the circumstances everyone can imagine. And with the appointment of Hartmut to the Professorship of International Relations at the Faculty of Social Science and Philosophy, we gained again an expert in not only expansion of centers to the rest of the world, but really in a global interpretation of the political economy of the world. And insofar, he serves really as a bridge between this very old tradition at Leipzig University and its current focus on the various transregional and global developments. I remember a little bit the troublesome times of his recruitment to the University of Leipzig, when there were some interventions not I don't know, is that Zoom bombing or no, it's only a test of some slides. When he was nominated, but then not nominated by the ministry at the time, and then there was some intervention by international scholars, I guess somewhere outside Europe, perhaps in New York. And then in the end, he was nominated, and we were very happy with that. And since he was extremely active, and is it to the pleasure of the students and his colleagues and friends here in Leipzig all the time. And I can only tell those now attending from everywhere that Hartmut is one of the most active scholars when it came to the switch from offline to online teaching. So over the last years, he was the one who transformed again his teaching, at least in its format, and get always very, very kind reactions from his students when teaching from his apartment to the guests. So, Hartmut, many thanks, and we hope for further decades of teaching and research with you and publishing with you. The procedure for this afternoon is the following. Steffi Marung, the current head of the Global Studies program, will speak next to me. And then we will have a presentation by Hartmut on his very recent book, of which you have the cover seen already. So he will introduce you to his next exciting intellectual achievements. Afterwards, we hope that Hannes Warnecke-Berger, who is one of the closest disciples, he is here in the middle of the screen now, will present a book on development, capitalism and rent, the political economy of Hartmut Elsenhans. I'm not sure if this is the political economy of Elsenhans or if it is the Elsenhansian political economy. We will see afterwards what you will explain us about his household finances, etc. Afterwards, we have some greetings by the director of the Political Science Department, Ireenius Pavel-Karolewski, by Ulf Engel, who was for a very long time responsible for the Global Studies program and is political scientist at the African Studies Department in Leipzig. And so far, he was the boss of Hartmut when it comes to teaching, but of course also a very close colleague and friend. We have a presentation by Dao Jarbal from Algeria, and then one by Jajai Amin from India. So with this, we try also a little bit to cover the international network Hartmut stands for and is part of. And then he will say a few words towards this first round of comments on his life and work. And afterwards, we close the very official part, but we leave this Zoom space here open so that everyone then can congratulate in person. And when you look at the number, we are now at 63. Please don't take the opportunity to give a 90 minutes lecture to Hartmut, but to reduce yourself to a small intervention and perhaps send longer texts to him in person. So that is what I was intended to say at the beginning. Steffi, it's now your turn.
Yeah, as a very good afternoon from my side, or good morning, good evening, wherever you are. I will only say very few words of thank you, actually, to Professor Elsenhans, because we are here not only to congratulate and celebrate a researcher who has made a profound impact on debates on the theorization and historization of capitalism, but also somebody who's an academic teacher and mentor who has shaped the careers and academic biographies of many generations of students. I personally never had the opportunity and pleasure to participate in one of Professor Elsenhans' classes, but since I started at the GESI, and this is the position from which I speak, I met cohort after cohort of students in global and European studies who were fascinated and challenged by, as well as committed to Professor Elsenhans as a teacher, to his arguments and expertise in the classroom. We went back to our archives, and if these are correct, Professor Elsenhans began teaching at the GESI in the winter term 2005-06, and has since then offered 61 courses for about 1,000 students. Most of them after his formal retirement from the Institute of Political Science, so we didn't count the students at this institute. And we've been more than lucky that Professor Elsenhans has identified the GESI as his retirement home for teaching and supervision, as the feedback which students give about his courses has profoundly also contributed to the reputation of our institute as a place to study the history of globalization and global capitalism from quite critical and innovative lenses. His courses have provoked students to carefully question seemingly safe assumptions about the rise of the West and the rise of capitalism, These courses were addressing the political economy of globalization more broadly and European integration more specifically. They were tremendously enriching our European studies program as well. The history of capitalism and state formation in global perspective, development economics, cultural, social, and political movements, including the, one could say, awkward ones, such as identitarian, populist, or fundamentalist movements in comparative and transregional perspective, or also the history of international relations and the role that different world regions, such as Asia and Northern Africa, would play in them. These courses and this training have inspired a number of quite critical and fascinating MA theses supervised by him, investigating, for example, Chinese and Indian competition for energy in sub-Saharan Africa, or providing critical surveys of the California schools' interpretations of transitions to capitalism, or exploring the crisis of the Eurozone and resistance to the EU's austerity policies in the wake of the Euro and financial crisis. For a lecturer who has taught his students for many years to make sense of the multiple crises of capitalism, the most recent turbulences in the wake of the corona pandemic were probably not much of a surprise to him. And Matthias was mentioning this already, while others were slow and still struggling to find out how to teach online. Professor Elsenhans had already set up all didactic and infrastructural preconditions to continue his academic mission in the virtual classroom. And he was always ready to share his insights and experiences with his younger colleagues at our lecturers' meetings. It is this kind of academic and collegial generosity to students and colleagues that we at GESI are deeply grateful of. So therefore, thank you, Professor Elsenhans, and we hope that we can continue to count on you as a colleague and mentor for our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Steffi. Some of you may be familiar with the German tradition of a Festschrift and how much work that is for all the people around. Hartmut said, okay, I will do it myself. And he produced, as you know him, I guess all, to do another contribution to the many books he has written, and he will introduce us now into this text. Hartmut, would you like to start? I guess there is also a presentation, right?
So can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, now? Okay,
Yep.
fine. Okay, I'm highly touched by the nice words of introduction, by the fact that there is such an event. I honestly did not think that anybody thinks about my birthday. Because basically, well, my feelings are gratitude, also satisfaction, which is, I think, legitimate at the end of the age. And I think, especially because, as Matthias already mentioned, I'm a relatively controversial intellectual in this country, at least. Perhaps not outside, but in this country at least. I think the case Matthias was mentioning led to a discussion about me in the commission of the German Federal Parliament. I think that's relatively rare that we advance until that level. And I feel also honored that the mainstream of German political science has imposed to the German Research Foundation, Deutsche Forschungsgemeinschaft, to refuse a positively evaluated, both evaluators positively evaluated a project with the argument that for decades I had been non-innovative. They are not criticizing the project, criticizing my general work. So I think, relatively controversial. It's also a special case because the book Matthias was mentioning, in which I present, and where I'm very happy that Leipzig University publishers have taken it, is 42 years old. I have not changed beyond reduction or reduction editing. I have decided to publish it because it's absolutely topical. The actual crisis is not different from the crisis of the world economy in the 1930s, basically. And it consists the first systematic formulation of my theories. To some extent, the preceding things are working in that direction, but world economic crisis allows to apply the theories in a way systematically on a limited period. What would normally books like this are presented after passing away posthumously? Now, what would the reviewer posthumously say? I think basically the central argument, capitalism does not tolerate rising mass incomes, it requires rising mass incomes. And therefore, the system depends on the empowerment of labor. 1919 means disempowerment of labor, despite whatever the achievements of the labor movement at the formal level, because the center of industrial activity passes to the country where labor movement is weakest, the United States. Labor movement is divided through the October Revolution, and finally also there is a very sterile struggle who interprets Marx in a better way, in a more orthodox way between the two tendencies of the labor movement. The success of the story is production outstrips consumption ultimately in the United States because rising mass incomes are not taking place. There are some complementary demand elements like luxury consumption, like a building boom, and like the shift to the stock market. And when there is a cough on the stock market, oil collapses, and all neoliberal mechanisms of overcoming crisis reveal themselves as not working. And when the mainstream economists are sufficiently discredited that nobody believes them anymore, then the governments do what they did in the 19th century already. They went for state spending, inefficiently in the United States because it was in the name of providing for the masses, efficiently in fascism because it was preparation for war. And the United States also became efficient when they were forced to go into the war. So it's a political question if you are able to create the necessary demand, but it's not an economic technical question. And the result of the whole thing is capitalism does not produce the demand which it supposes to have. And the secondary result is, the theories of imperialism are wrong. There is no flow of capital looking for profitability because of the lower composition of the lower organic composition of capital. So at the center of my work, there is the argument capitalism does not produce the level and structure of demand which it requires, and therefore capitalism needs political embeddedness, but not in legal terms, but in a relation of power favorable to labor. Neoclassical economics with rising wages due to scarcity of labor work if labor is empowered, not if labor is jobless. And that means from this point off, all the different strands of my further work can be gauged. My development thinking centers around the question how to use market and plan in order to empower labor by restructuring the economy in a way that labor, by its spontaneous tendencies for asking for higher wages, higher incomes, dynamizes production. If the productive apparatus cannot respond, that does not work. Now, if this economy has to be restructured without reacting directly to market signals, the state comes in. And there is the place of my theory of the state class. I'm much less critical of the state class than most of my reviewers. I think the state class has some chances of overcoming underdevelopment. And as the state class is rent-based, the next argument is rent. I have a much larger rent notion than those people who took me out at the Deutsche Forschungsgemeinschaft because exactly of my argument about rent. I think rent is not linked to raw material exports. It's rent basically to inexistence of the capitalist mechanism of adjusting prices to differences in productivity growth by means of scarcity of labor. I do not want, because I don't want to abuse the time. I think those who have read my things are aware that this is the central argument. Now, these things were totally opposed to Marxism, because Marxism thinks capitalism and the powerful cannot provide development. And it's also totally opposed to a neoliberal thinking, because they think capitalism produces automatically the required levels of demand. Therefore, the next question was, does the expansion of capitalism through globalization change this deficit? Essentially, globalization is increasing exports of manufactured products on the basis of devaluation. And even if you are able to devalue because you are producing your own wage goods, the workers have not low real wages, they have low international costs. If you are able, the impact is only in some cases sufficient to empower labor. I see Bertolt Kuhn now, he would agree with me, that the scarcity of labor in China has empowered Chinese working class, even if the party is not happy about it. I think the same happens in South Korea, etc. But normally it does not. And all the successful cases had exactly the necessary complementary reforms in the political, because basically all those countries which were very successful have engineered drastic agrarian reforms in order to empower labor by at least having some land. So our argument is the mechanism of pockets of unemployed people will remain if you are not engaging massive social reforms together with globalization and export-oriented industrialization. And this argument implies that you have a tendency of the world system to underconsumption because you are replacing well-paid jobs in international currency by cheap jobs in the periphery, as long as you are not absorbing the unemployment in the marginality-ridden economies of the South, if you are not removing rent, basically, by using it productively. Therefore, my last argument is the globalization of rent, as in my eyes, the dominant tendency which takes place actually. I have formulated, is one of the books on the cover, this in a economic, in economics, and the reason was the students in my courses so much said we don't have a book where you explain your economics, and the idea was born to write the book. What remains as necessity is to write the historical framework. I've already announced that I will do this. I will write it. Hannes Warnecke has already reserved the publication for his series here with Routledge. So I will write this book when I have done some small other things. Because I have also some responsibility with Algeria. I'm the only one who has very many interviews which are already in Algiers, the tape. And I'm the only one who has a relatively, I know it here because the IFO said to the French archives, the polls on Algerian war. And Rashid has said to help me, and then these things I have still to do. And then I will not retire, but I will become like a monk, only making the history of the capitalist world system. What about teaching? As long as my health allows it, I will do it with the GZ. I can say the doctors are very happy with my health because I'm really living up to all their prescription. But naturally, as you are realizing, I'm 80, and whether it's still decades, as Matthias thinks, that I would make me very happy if it's like this. I don't know, at least, I behave like I should do, So I am very thankful for your coming and listening. My deep feeling today is gratitude and also some satisfaction. I think that I have made a contribution which is left, but which is not in the line of orthodox Marxism, and therefore it may become practical, because I don't think that we will abhor the market society. What we have to do is to know how to embed a market society in the overall goal of humanly mastering society. I think in reality, that was the hope of Marx. Not how we abolish the market, but how we dominate the market and make it instrumental for our goals. So I stop here in order not to take too much of your time. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Hartmut. And I guess everyone will be happy to have the book in hand, which needs only to be covered technically, and then we can send it out to all participants of today's meeting. Hannes, you are next, and so I'm very curious, what is the political economy of Hartmut Elsenhans?
Yeah, thank you very much, first of all, Steffi and Professor Medel, to invite me to this event. And I want to present the book I edited with Palgrave, which takes the title Development Capitalism and the Political Economy of Hartmut Elsenhans. So in a way, this book is a tribute to Hartmut Elsenhans, of course, for this 80th birthday. And it comprises a collection of previously unpublished papers and articles, as well as some chapters already published in German and French. And I think it comprises those texts and chapters that are crucial to understand the development of his theory. It takes a broad range of topics, but this book has also a double objective. First, it was planned as a Festschrift. The objective is, of course, to pay tribute to the work of Hartmut Elsenhans. But the second objective of this work is also to introduce to the work of Hartmut, as well as to present his work and his oeuvre to an English-speaking and therefore broader audience than the German-speaking academia. It was somehow a very challenging work to edit the book, because Hartmut always pursued his own way, and this entire work escapes from traditional categorizations and somehow is caught in between the ordinary academic disciplines. It is, of course, truly interdisciplinary, although it is rooted in political science and economics. It touches on sociology, global history, philosophy, and anthropology. So where to get started? It is part of international relations and North-South relations, but Hartmut provokes through presenting an alternative approach to mainstream IR theories and development studies. His work is situated within modernization theory and dependency approaches, or between realism and idealism in IR. So his position cannot be easily attributed to political streams, too left for the conservatives, or being too pro-capitalist in a way for the left. So it is still in between. In this regard, it's an eclecticist account, and it's, I think, this non-conformity that all too often irritates the reader, but at the same time, it is this non-conformity that also provokes new ideas and innovations. Apart from all these often provoking articles and comments, which of course, as he mentioned, not only brought him applause and recognition, it is, I think, particularly the concept of rent and the rent theory that frames his academic writing. And it is this context and this concept of rent that is at the core of his theoretical writing, and which is also at the core of the book I edited to tribute to his theory. This concept of rent brings him in company to the classics of political economy, from Adam Smith to Mill, and finally, of course, to Marx, as he told us today. Now, at least Mill once wrote that at the heart of political economy, the cardinal doctrine of political economy should be the theory of rent. For the classics, the topic of rent is crucial, but it then eventually became forgotten by the rise of neoclassical equilibrium economics. The classics saw capitalism in the making, but they also witnessed and acknowledged that the ancien regime was still powerful and would be still able to strike back and to defend the traditional order. For the classics, and of course Marx is the best example, capitalism is contested. This became forgotten, and not at least Keynes, in his famous 24th chapter of the General Treaty, wished for the euthanasia of the rentier, that rents and those persons that eventually appropriate rent, the rentiers, would once vanish in the course of capitalist development. Following this idea, Hartmut follows rather the classics than the neoclassics. For Hartmut, capitalism is characterized by both external and internal contradictions. Externally, capitalism is threatened by the strength of rent that today predominates in the global South. In a way, this is a Luxembourgian moment in his writing. Internally, capitalism is threatened by excessive technological developments and monopolies, the Kaleckian moment in his writing, as well as by private savings that weaken consumption and, in the end, investment spending, in a way, the classic Keynesian moment. The question of whether we are witnessing a transition out of capitalism, which became recently and heavily discussed in the New Left Review, then appears to be a crucial question that has been one of the critical concerns of Hartmut from the very beginning. It is this interplay of internal and external contradictions of capitalism from which Hartmut is able to derive both his theory on rising mass incomes as a precondition of capitalist growth, as well as development theory and development strategies for economies of the global South. Capitalism for him then is both too strong and too weak at the same time. It is too strong to eventually favor the interest of capitalism, as well as too weak to empower labor at the global level. Instead of expanding global capitalism, rent and labor surplus not only goes hand in hand, but following his ideas will eventually characterize our global world. For Marxists, as well as for neoliberals, this is in a way a heretical argument. Although Elsenhans adopts a Marxist framework and large parts of Marxist historical materialism, he places the Kaleckian growth and profit theory at the core of his argument. Hartmut identifies a global labor surplus as the current threat to the liberal world order. Global convergence is less likely in this regard. Instead, following his perspective, global uneven development is and will be the usual case. So instead of sharing the vision of Keynes, who expected to witness the vanishing of the rentier, Hartmut rather follows Adam Smith in a way, in highlighting that rent remains on the scene, and there always will be somebody who, to cite Adam Smith, loved to reap where they never saw. So Hartmut and his entire work reminds us that rent and rent theory remains a cardinal doctrine of political economy. And this book wants to pay tribute to this idea and wants, of course, pay tribute to the work of Hartmut. But additionally, this book is also an invitation for those who want to get into contact with the irritating and heterodox, but I think always at the same time inspiring and refreshing reading. Hartmut, I wish you all the best. Again, happy birthday. And of course, I'm looking forward to read the next 6 volumes that you surely are going to write in the next couple of years. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your nice words.
So you see, Hartmut, when we continue, you get decades of teaching, volumes after volumes. We will see how this will go on. Constance Clem, who is in fact the master of this ceremony here and has organized all our doing and has arranged also the technical equipment, for which I'm extremely grateful as well, has put now a series of 4 interventions under the title of Greetings and Congratulations. And I ask first Professor Karolewski from the Institute of Political Science in Leipzig.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here, a great honor actually to greet you and to congratulate you, and specifically as a director or managing director of the Institute of Political Science, because we've never met in person on the one hand, but of course I know your research, I know your contributions to political science, to global studies, to political economy. I've known them already as a student at the University of Potsdam, where I did my studies in political science. So you're a very known figure to many generations of political scientists, I would like to say. And also for this reason, your contribution has been great to different fields of research, and Leipzig was able to gain one of the prominent people in this field for your tenure as a professor at the Institute. Your tenure ended before I came to Leipzig, but of course, I've known about you, and I did a little contribution actually to one of the books, or a book that is a conversation with you. A couple of years back, it was published by two of my former students that published conversation with you on a critique of capitalism. It was published by Palgrave, and it's called Hartmut, Elsenhans, and a Critique of Capitalism, Conversations on Theory and Political Implications. So I did some reviewing of the book, and then I reviewed the book with great pleasure, I must say, for the publisher. So it was my little contribution without ever knowing you in person, but perhaps it can change, because whenever you are still in Leipzig, you're absolutely welcome to join us at our institute to talk and to exchange. And I hope that this will be the case in the next years to come. So congratulations, thank you very much. And of course, best wishes to your 80th birthday. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We move to Ulf Engel, next speaker here.
Thank you very much. Dear Hartmut, most social scientists aspire to one day stand on the shoulders of some giant. This can be a painful process in itself, but it is absolutely scary to meet one of these giants in real life. So allow me to briefly recall my first two encounters with Hartmut, as well as a more general observation on his role at Leipzig University. My first encounter was as a young postdoc and co-editor of a volume on Africa between decolonization, state failure and democratization, published in 1995 by the German Institute for African Studies in Hamburg. Hartmut's chapter was on state failure and Black Africa. Yes, in those days, this was the terminology, subtitled Crisis of the Development State or Specific Problems of Africa. First, I was intimidated by the references. So many people I considered to be giants in their own right, just to be turned upside down by Hartmut. Second, I was intimidated by the language. The text was in German, and still I only understood half of it. I was struggling to translate that into something I thought could be understood by a larger audience. I guess I've utterly failed doing so. Sorry, Hartmut, for messing up your text. My second encounter with Hartmut was in 1998 in Leipzig, this time in person. I had applied for the position of politics in Africa at the Institute of African Studies, and Hartmut was a member of the appointments committee. In real life, I thought this person was even more intimidating. Sitting behind a stack of thieves, he didn't stop correcting during the hearing, and side by side to a gigantic bottle of Coke. At one point of the meeting, he raised his head and asked, if I remember correctly, "You have developed a nice theoretical argument in your habilitation, which was on Germany's African policy, using a constructivist frame. But tell me, what have you done that XYZ, I forgot the name, hasn't already said in 1935 in his book on Germany's imperial naval policy?" Okay, for the moment I was flabbergasted. Once I had recovered, I looked it up, and darn, in principle, Hartmut was right. So this taught an early lesson on discourse of newness. Nevertheless, I got the job, and this explains my third encounter with Hartmut. As you all have gathered by now, in his academic life, he has developed a thorough, complex academic universal. Few questions he cannot explain. And even more so, I was impressed by the way that Hartmut hung back and did not enforce his worldview on colleagues when we discussed the application for a collaborative research center, in 2006. We managed to get funding for the critical junctures of globalization project, of which Hartmut was an important and inspiring part. Now, the edited volume I mentioned at the beginning of my remarks was actually in honor of Franz Ansprenger and his 65th birthday in 1992. Ansprenger was instrumental in bringing Africa into political science into Germany. In this respect, it was a great coincidence, if you believe in these things, that I met Hartmut again in Berlin in September this year at another symposium in honor of Ansprenger, who had passed away early this year at the age of 93. Hartmut, you have always remained a beacon in the German desert called political science. Many happy returns. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I was really a little bit ashamed about all these laudaciones.
We will collect a couple more of these anecdotes, and I'm pretty sure at the end of the event we will have a full sack of wonderful such remembrance of meetings with you.
Dear Hartmut, on your 80th birthday, I wish you all the best, especially good health. Even as a student, I was fascinated by your lectures. I come from Halle every day to attend your lectures in Leipzig. I approached you on one of your public lectures and asked you if you accept to supervise my PhD project. This became the turning point in my life. You offered me a position as a collaborator in your department. I thank you for that. I have the honor of being your last research assistant. Very quickly I gained your trust and a long friendship began. As a colleague from me in Leipzig said, I was the son you always wanted. Academically, I found it very fascinating, even in the first days in Leipzig, how you can explain the world in few minutes. You were and you are an important source of inspiration. You always manage to give different readings, views, and perspectives. Dear Hartmut, you are a great professor, an important academic reference not only for me and my academic career. Your theoretical contribution to the academic debates put you in the rank of Marx and Weber. Dear Hartmut, Eid Milad Saïd, Esgosem Gez, joyeux anniversaire.
Monsieur Dao Djerbal, qui a préparé aussi quelques présentations et qui nous joint d'Alger, je crois.
Merci à vous. Je voudrais m'excuser. Please, dear colleagues, forgive me to don't speak in English, but I will speak in French, and I try to be short in my speech. Premièrement, je suis tellement fier, heureux et honoré de participer à cet hommage au professeur Hartmut Elsenhans. Le professeur Hartmut Elsenhans, que j'ai rencontré alors que j'étais jeune assistant à l'université d'Alger, à la faculté des sciences économiques, où j'enseignais l'histoire économique générale. Et à la fin des années 70, vers 1978, il avait été invité par les professeurs de l'Institut pour faire une conférence à l'université d'Alger, dans un grand amphithéâtre plein à craquer de monde, d'étudiants et de professeurs. Et j'ai entendu pour la première fois Hartmut Elsenhans développer des théories critiques sur les approches matérialistes historiques de l'histoire ou de l'économie, avec lesquelles nous avions été formés par nos professeurs coopérants français, marxistes, marxistes-léninistes ou critiques du stalinisme. Et puis là, pour la première fois, j'entendais une approche complètement inattendue, originale, par rapport à tout ce que nous avions appris de l'économie. Et il faisait son intervention au tableau, tout en écrivant des formules mathématiques pour démonter les approches que nous avions apprises jusque-là. Et donc, je m'étais interrogé sur ce professeur qu'on faisait venir d'Allemagne, de tendance social-démocrate, me semblait-il à l'époque, et son rapport avec les théories de l'histoire et les théories de l'économie. J'étais tout jeune enseignant et ce souvenir m'est resté jusqu'à ce jour. Puis par la suite, en raison des crises que l'Algérie nouvellement indépendante traversait, je me suis permis de l'approcher au moment où, au tournant des années 90, 1990, nous étions en train de rentrer dans la période du terrorisme islamiste. Et cette période a été aussi pour nous une période extrêmement importante dans la remise en question des théories de la transition économique, sociale et politique. Et là aussi, encore une fois, j'ai rencontré le professeur Hartmut Elsenhans et dans cette rencontre, je me suis rendu compte que Hartmut Elsenhans était aussi un historien. Et en tant qu'historien, il avait aussi apporté la plus grande contribution que j'ai pu lire sur l'histoire de l'Algérie coloniale, sur l'histoire de la guerre de libération en Algérie et sur le rapport entre l'Algérie et la France. Aussi, à ce moment-là, je me suis lancé avec quelques amis, quelques collègues, quelques camarades dans la publication d'une revue qui s'appelle la revue Naqd, qui veut dire en arabe critique. C'est une revue d'études et de critique sociale. Et dans cette revue, nous avions l'intention et le projet de prendre à bras-le-corps les problèmes qui se posaient à une société colonisée qui sortait de la colonisation pour se bâtir, se construire en société de développement pour le bien commun de toute la population, de la société. Cependant, la transition de l'économie coloniale, capitaliste, avec ses caractéristiques coloniales, à une économie de type social-bureaucratique ou une économie de monopole d'État, nous posait d'énormes problèmes. Et là, nous avons à nouveau rencontré Hartmut Elsenhans, et Hartmut nous avait fait l'honneur de participer à des numéros extrêmement importants de la revue Naqd à partir de 1992, un des premiers numéros de la revue sur les questions de l'ajustement structurel et les économies de transition. Puis sont venues les années 80, les années de la crise du système social bureaucratique ou de monopole d'État. Et là, nous entrions dans une nouvelle phase d'économie libérale et d'économie qui commençait à voir apparaître des phénomènes qu'on appelait l'économie informelle, qu'on appelait l'économie périphérique, non contrôlée par l'État, et qui posait le problème de la relation entre l'ajustement structurel et les systèmes politiques. À ce moment-là, évidemment, le Fonds monétaire international et la Banque mondiale imposaient à l'Algérie un certain nombre de réformes qui avaient provoqué un déséquilibre. Et ce déséquilibre avait entraîné en fait une dette, un endettement considérable de l'État algérien qui atteignait les 100% ou dépassait les 100% du produit national brut. Et donc, à ce moment-là, se posait le problème de notre relation à la souveraineté, à l'autorité politique de l'État, parce qu'apparaissaient les formes d'une domination et de dépendance par rapport à l'extérieur, et en l'occurrence, la domination et la dépendance par rapport au système capitaliste international tel qu'il se développait dans les années 80. Et là, avec ce numéro sur domination et dépendance, à nouveau, le professeur Elsenhans, Hartmut Elsenhans, comme on l'appelle ici, donc nous a aussi apporté une contribution avec aussi d'autres auteurs comme Noam Chomsky, comme William Quandt, comme d'autres, comme Samir Amin aussi, et d'autres économistes de renom. Et il apportait ainsi une lecture importante de ce qui était en train de se produire et qui nous permettait à nous, avec la revue dont vous voyez ici les couvertures en langue française, mais qui était une revue bilingue en français et en arabe, ça nous permettait de faire passer la pensée et les théories du professeur Elsenhans en langue arabe, parce qu'en Algérie indépendante, dans les années 80, puis dans les années 90 à ce jour, le plus grand nombre de ceux qui savaient lire et écrire le faisaient en langue arabe. Mais il n'y avait pratiquement aucune étude sur les conditions de la détermination, des formes de la production, des formes de l'échange et des formes de la domination. Et c'est ainsi que, grâce à un effort soutenu, nous allions donc transmettre à un public de plus en plus large, arabophone, au Maghreb, au Maroc, en Tunisie, en Algérie, mais aussi au Moyen-Orient, les théories et la pensée du professeur Elsenhans. Puis est venue la période du terrorisme. Et dans la période du terrorisme, là aussi, les questions du passage de l'économie libérale à l'économie néolibérale, accompagnées par des périodes de terreur, avaient laissé apparaître les premières formes de l'économie de rente. Et dans cette économie de rente, là aussi, nous avons retrouvé le professeur Elsenhans qui essayait de décrypter la relation entre le capital le système capitaliste de la transition et dans des pays en voie de développement et la question de l'apparition et du développement de la rente. Donc là aussi, nous avons bénéficié des travaux de notre ancien collègue, notre aîné, le professeur Elsenhans, jusqu'à arriver à la question de cette clientèle, cette formation de la rente qui est devenue un système de domination, un système politique qui s'est emparé de l'État par clientèle interposée. Et pour terminer, donc depuis les années 1970-80 jusqu'à 2019-2020, nous avons décidé de rendre hommage au professeur Elsenhans en regroupant ses travaux dans un ouvrage qu'on a appelé Guerre d'Algérie et Voie algérienne de développement, parce que pendant toute cette période des années 70 jusqu'aux années 2000, le professeur Elsenhans nous a non seulement aidé à penser l'économique, à penser le politique, à penser la relation entre le développement et la prédation et les économies de la rente et de la prédation, que nous avons aussi, à ce moment-là, pensé qu'il était important de rappeler aussi qu'il a été un des principaux conseillers de l'économie algérienne au niveau aussi des gouvernements qui se sont succédés dans les années 70 et 80. Et c'est ainsi que dans notre volonté de lui rendre ce qu'il nous a donné, nous avons organisé à Alger en 2019 une rencontre autour des travaux de Elsenhans, où on a retrouvé non seulement les cadres de l'économie, de la planification, les professeurs de sciences économiques, mais aussi tous les activistes de la démocratie et de la liberté pendant ces 3 ou 4 décennies qui lui ont rendu cet hommage dans la salle de l'hôtel Sofitel à Alger. Et là, je ne pourrais dire à tous ceux qui sont là, présents, que Hartmut Elsenhans n'était pas seulement notre professeur, mais notre ami et notre camarade qui nous a accompagnés côte à côte dans toutes les épreuves que nous avons traversées, dans toutes les menaces qui pesaient sur la production d'une pensée critique et le travail qu'il a fait pour l'histoire de l'Algérie, pour l'histoire de l'économie, pour la pensée économique contemporaine, pour nous, est absolument d'une très grande valeur. Et merci et joyeux anniversaire, cher ami Hartmut.
Merci. Je suis très touché, cher Dao. I'm very much moved because, in fact, Algeria and India are the places where I feel at home, at least as much as in Germany. I'm always very proud to not lose my way when I am in Alger. I find the streets are only the one-way senses, the one-way streets are a problem for me because they change sometimes between my visits to the city. And I really worked on my own with the German budget inside the Ministry of Planification. And I was part of the conflicts between the minister and the state secretary. And basically, I survived in these cases. So that my Algerian collaborator said that I am perhaps more tricky than still Algerians are. And that was a great honor for me. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I can only join Hartmut in thanking Professor Jabal that he reminded us of the importance of Algeria in the work of Hartmut, but also in his life. And at the same time, with the title of this one contribution on India being remarked in Algeria, we see that Hartmut served as a kind of bridge also between these two regions. And I'm happy to announce now Jajarai Amin as the next speaker in this round for his intervention.
My pleasure to speak about Professor Hartmut on the occasion of his 80th birthday. I thank the organizers for this opportunity. Hartmut is a good friend of mine and my role model. I always respected him both as a scholar and as also as a person. Now, his unconventional thoughts on rent theory, marginality, underdevelopment, underconsumption, always fascinated me. And I always felt that he offers fresh insights on labor empowerment, inequality, poverty, and development. And much of the things are actually very important from the Indian context. Now, his contents are tough and require a very nuanced understanding of kids. But Hartmut has a knack of presenting his views in a very simple way, and that is interesting. The number of languages in which his books are translated speaks of the popularity and scholarship of the person. Much, of course, is actually said in this meeting about his intellectual contribution. So let me just turn to my personal interaction with Professor Hartmut. Now, I met Professor Hartmut about 30 years back in Delhi when I was a student. Now, Professor Hartmut at that time was, as I understand, was a visiting professor in Jawaharlal Nehru University, Delhi, and I was a PhD student at that time. Now, I don't remember, what Professor Hartmut actually has said at that time, because I did not understand then, his ideas. But what I still remember is his words that, if European Union has to become popular in India, it has to be moved out of Delhi. Now, in those days, in 1980s, hardly anybody knew about, European Union. And if at all, if somebody knew about European Union, it was only, the intellectuals in Delhi, especially in JNU, were aware of these things. Now, whether, his ideas that, the European Union has to be taken out of capital, that is from Delhi, to other parts of India, whether it has worked out immediately or not. The fact is that, gradually this kind of thing has actually come out. And when I joined Mangalore University, as a young lecturer, I started taking the things very seriously. And in fact, in all my efforts, apart from my research supervisor, R.K. Jain, it was Professor Hartmut Elsenhans, who has supported me in building up, European Union studies in Mangalore. And I'm really grateful to that. Because today, Mangalore has become, Mangalore University has become one of the centers well known for European Union studies, and it has also has bagged good number of Erasmus projects. And today, it is not only in Mangalore, even in other parts of India, European Union has studies has become very important. And of course, one can attribute large number of reasons for this, but one of the very important point, or one of the very strong point in this regard, is that the support that it has received from the intellectuals like Hartmut, and that actually has gone a long way in building up European Union studies in India. And therefore, apart from his ideas, I would always remember Professor Hartmut, participating in his seminars, touring and delivering special lectures on European Union to young students in different colleges of India, mixing with all kinds of people, sharing his ideas and publications. All that has actually created a good impression about European Union in India. And of course, today it has become a very important discipline in India, and much of the credit definitely goes to Hartmut Elsenhans. But apart from his intellectual capacity, I cannot actually resist talking about the person. As I understand, Professor Hartmut is a very simple kind of person, has a very genuine curiosity in even the small things that interest him. He is always very comfortable in the groups and even the new sets of people also. Whenever he's in the family setting, he is very comfortable and has won the hearts of all people in the family, whether it's youngsters or whether it's olders or even with the children also. And I had an occasion to sit with him for a very long number of hours and chat with him. This has continued, both in India and also, whenever I visited Leipzig also. Now, and one of the very, very important things that I would speak about Hartmut is that, in spite of being such a, towering intellectual, he has never showed any kind of an intellectual arrogance, with anybody. And even when he disagrees with somebody, he has a very polite way of, putting his dissent. That is why probably, Hartmut has, so many fans and, so many, followers he has acquired wherever he has actually gone around. And it is also a very well-known fact that Hartmut is an extremely helpful person and has always gone out of his way to help people. And he never bothered about his personal space, whenever his friends visited him. And it was because of Hartmut, I actually got to know Germany very closely. It was his ideas, it was his it was my personal discussion with him that has actually given me a very different idea about Germany and also in general with the European Union. Now he is he likes being with the people, very affectionate towards the younger ones, and of course very loving father of 2 daughters. Such a great academician becomes quite open when he starts sharing his life experiences, and it is these rare qualities that that actually makes an Indian very surprising about the Western intellectual. Now very often one forgets his age while talking to him, and today I am reminded that he is 80 years. But deep inside I know that Hartmut still has the innocence of child. Hartmut, I wish you that you would continue to do what you love most, that is books, writings, and stimulating new ideas. But at the same time, I also wish that you remain young at heart as always and continue to inspire the younger generation. I wish you good health, happiness, and hope you would continue to guide all of us, and all the best to you.
Thank you very much for this reminder of the jubilarian talking to people around the world. So Hartmut, we would in our scenario, we have now foreseen a couple of minutes for you to answer to some of the memories, but also perhaps to remember yourself, your moments of meeting people around the world, in Algeria, in Tunisia, in India, in Pakistan, and elsewhere, before we then close this first official part. Hartmut.
Well, I'm deeply touched by what all was said. Yeah, sometimes I have the feeling, yeah, I hope that I did not hurt anybody with my perhaps sometimes demanding way of insisting. Yeah, I felt a little bit ashamed when Ulf told me how I addressed him in this selection session. Yeah, but Ulf, you can be sure I voted for you. So don't worry. Yeah. I'm absolutely naturally very much touched by the fact that so many of you from so different shades of society, different countries are coming. Yeah. It's true, Algeria was my first place outside. I add 2 things. When I was invited to India in, I think, 1986, I was so much charmed by India that I thought that I shift my empirical work to India, because the Indians were so nice to my theories. I had rarely had so much support for my theories. I thought perhaps they are not wrong. Yeah? The Indians said, these are very interesting theories, and it's very nice that all these problems do not occur in our country. We know they occur in our country, and they occur also elsewhere. So that was the point. And then I was very proud to be invited to Pakistan. I see Noman Sata sitting here, yeah, because I think there are not so many people who have been invited to GNU and to Qaid-e-Azad University. You are creating normally Indian clients and Pakistani clients, and I was above this thing. Yeah, so I was very proud of it. Yeah. I think you have all very nicely captured the essence of what I'm doing now. I'm relatively proud to have remained by the awkwardness of my theories away from any powerful lobbies. Yeah. So basically, yeah, what I said at the beginning that I'm controversial was a big protection for developing my ideas. And as I was not in powerful networks, I had the time to develop the ideas. I think in all the contributions it was relatively clear that I unfolded an argument. That's why I presented today the book where its first was entirely developed. I unfolded an argument without looking whether I am praised or not. Mr. Korolevsky, I will come back to your offer and I will phone to you. We will have a cup of coffee, yeah. We do not need a seminar because this is now here, yeah. But I'm very happy to come to meet you in person. Ulf has talked about a giant, yeah, that makes me fearful, yeah, because the certainty with which I was working was that I am not a giant, that I do not influence history, so I can think about the things like somebody who plays with these ideas. It's nice, perhaps I can do with it now at the age. Now, it's true. I'm closely linked to the intellectual evolution of Algeria. And the book you are publishing comprised of an article dedicated to the head of the Islamic Council. And normally I pass in Algeria as somebody left. So it covers the whole spectrum of ideas. And I was very proud for these things. India, everybody knows that I have a very close relation to India, also privately. I was married to an Indian lady once because she died. So India was the area where I learned about the poor beyond the poor, because the families which I was associated with poor. I think a lot of my work is that I'm a real expert of managing poor, because I had to manage two families who were poor. So basically I had a close connection. I think you have described the width of what is my life experience, and you have made it clear for me and for others how rich my life was, basically, and that makes me very satisfied at the end of the day. I am naturally highly touched here because 80th birthday, you are celebrating, but you know that that is a point of celebration beyond which you are now going into your bunk situation. But I think it's fine, and I thank you very much for all your interventions, for the presentations, but also for your congratulations. I'm telling you, I did not think about any event like this, but very nice. Thank you.
Happy birthday, Professor Elsenhans. Neil and I are here in Vienna. toasting on your 80th birthday today. And we would love to say a few words about you, about our relationship with you. And actually, my relationship with you is one that you don't know about, because it started 11 years ago at the University of Leipzig when I took a few of your classes. And one of the assignments that you gave inspired me to do my master's thesis. That helped me with the current career that I have now at an international organization. But also, just a few weeks ago, it ended up in a publication of this book on political economy, which very nicely you also accepted to write a foreword for us. And we were really happy about it. And I thank you for all the intellectual help and support in all these years, and for great deal of the success I've had in the past years.
Yes, I would also like to echo Edgar's thoughts. It's a privilege to toast your birthday here from Vienna. Sadly, we can't be there at the moment in Leipzig. But yes, I've also had a great professional development with Professor Elsenhans. I started off in his classes, and I always found them, what appealed to me was the fact that here was someone delivering their own theory in the classroom, and that was always very intriguing for me, and it basically made me take it on further to the point that I offered to proofread for some of Professor Elsenhans's English publications, which he accepted, and I took on that role for a few years. And I remember it was at the point that I was very interested in his global world capitalist theory that I thought, actually, I want to write something on this. And what we did was, me and a co-author, Karina Schultz, we went for a series of interviews with Professor Elsenhans on a range of his most economic theories. And we turned it into a book, which was a testimony to Professor Elsenhans here. It's a simple version of his theories, but I think it captures the main thoughts. And I think you were also quite happy with it, Professor. So we were glad to help you produce this, and it's a proud book for us. But yeah, I mean, what attracted me to work with you was the fact that your erudition was just so mammoth. You always had independent thinking on any topic we would throw at you, and it was also your fearlessness. You wouldn't take a backward step in expressing your views. You would pick an argument and you would go for it, and that was always refreshing to learn from as a student. And you also showed patience with us as students coming through. We were sometimes a bit slow, depending on what time it was in the morning, but we would you would stick with us, and we really appreciated it. So yeah, I mean, personally, you've influenced me in a lot of ways. I also work for an international organization, UNODC, on economic development, and I know your thoughts in economic development has inspired me to continue this career, seeing the potential and trying to influence matters in that way. So you've influenced me personally and professionally, and it's been a real privilege to share some of our lives together. And yeah, I toast you alongside Edgar and wish you a great day. And I would just like to end on one quote that you gave on the last page of this book, which was a very short but succinct summary, I think, of your outlook. You said, in reference to a question about reflecting on your life, you said, "Personally, I'm really proud of my life. Not even so much of my writings, but I'm proud of my life for the fact that I have extremely good relationships with my 2 children. This and several other aspects I consider achievements. Understanding the limits of our possibilities, the necessity of understanding situations, and the necessity of maintaining dignity, to never be absorbed by feelings of hatred or fear, but to always keep yourself in balance." I think that sums up your great and balanced outlook. And yeah, from Edgar and me, we wish you a great day, and happy birthday again.
Happy birthday, and hope to see you soon in Leipzig.